paper, so hopefully you have as well, ready to make lots of notes. And our speaker today is really picking up on the website, the webinar I did the other day on how to build a great website. I thought I'd introduce you and bring along Stephen. Stephen, I've known for many years now, and he's been my graphic designer since I started this business way back in 2014. He's awesome at what he does, and he's so good that most of the people in the Value Pricing Academy now use Stephen for one thing or another. Very often building brochures, the ones that I write for the Academy. Stephen then designs them, but he does a lot more than that. So many of you know Stephen well already. I'm not going to say much more about that because I'm sure Stephen's got his own introduction. So with that said, Stephen, do you want to kick us off?
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Yeah, most of you will know me. I used to work with Mark for, what was it? I think it was about 6 years we worked together. And then I've been working on my own, doing my own thing for about 7 years now. I'm currently in Cabo San Lucas. So whilst most of you are locked down in the UK, I'm here. I've got a beach, I've got a balcony, I've got margaritas, so I feel very fortunate to be here. Actually, when Mark did his webinar 2-3 weeks ago, I was driving from Cabo to Omaha in Nebraska, and I almost didn't make the webinar. I went to Starbucks. I was about 10 minutes early, and I sat down and I bought my sandwich, and they said, "Oh, you can't stay." I was like, "Oh, so I've got to watch the webinar. I may need to contribute." And they said, "Sorry, you can't stay in because of the social distancing." So I had to sit outside. The warmest thing I had was a t-shirt. It was 5 degrees, and so for the first part of the webinar, if I was on video, you would have seen me shaking, and there was steam coming out of my mouth. But as so often is the case in the States, if you've got a British accent, you can more often than not sweet talk your way into anything. So after a few minutes, I was allowed into the Starbucks and I let me sit down. Anyway, I'm here, it's warm, I'm a lot happier this week. As Mark said, we are building on what Mark talked about a few weeks ago. This came from an initial post that Mark made on a website, on a Facebook group, where he offered to critique people's websites. And people found that super valuable. And we had 10 more people that have submitted websites to be critiqued today, which I'm going to do. However, a lot of the feedback is very similar for each site. And I didn't want to copy or duplicate too much of what Mark said. As I mentioned, Mark did do a fantastic webinar. This was the webinar. I'm sure many of you were on that. And he covered lots of things from creating a niche and positioning yourself as the expert in that niche to having a landing page, a lead page where you're capturing people's contact details. We're not going to cover any of that, even though that's super, super important. If you do want to revisit that webinar or watch it for the first time, I'm sure Mark or Sarah or Emily has that link that they'd be happy to send you. But for today, I'm going to try and cover new content, stuff that you can learn in either his website critique video or the webinar last week. As Mark mentioned, if you've got any questions, put them in the Q&A box, and myself or Mark will be happy to answer them at the end. Here we go. So, like I said, we had 10 websites that were submitted to be critiqued. And what I've done, I didn't want to mention the same points from every single site. So for some websites, I've just got one point of critique, but they're all unique to you, but it should benefit all of you. So what I'm going to do now, I will go to the first website. Bear with me while I share my screen. Here we go. So this was the first website, SDA. Now this is a fantastic website. I've got a lot of good things that I could say about this website, but for now, I won't. I will start with just 1 point. So when you first go onto this website, you get this pop-up. Now, lots of websites use pop-ups. Personally, I'm not a fan. I find them to be quite jarring. I find them to be quite intrusive, like I'm trying to be sold to. But I understand that some people like them. There are occasions where I think they're appropriate, but this I don't think does pop up particularly well. So I've clicked off of the pop-up, which I think most people do, and then I want to go to their About Us page, find out more about Stanley. Then when I click back, every time I go back to the home page, even though I've clicked off of the pop-up, it still comes back again. And you can do that. You can go from any page, and then as long as you go back to the home page by clicking on the logo in the top or clicking back in the browser, the pop-up pops up again. And that's gonna frustrate people. You can do all kinds of things with pop-ups. You can say, if they've clicked off of it, don't show again for 5 minutes, or only show the pop-up after 30 seconds. After they've been on my homepage for 30 seconds, then show it. So if you do use a pop-up, and personally, I'm not a huge fan, but if you do use them, as a basic thing, make sure that if they click off of the pop-up, it's not going to come up again immediately afterwards. I do like the 5-minute delay idea. If you are gonna use them, we are going to come back to this website, like I said, because there's a lot of really great things about this. But for now, we are going to move on to Claudette from Joelberg. Now, on this website, I want to highlight something: readability. So if we scroll down here, we can see this text here. Now, this text is a serif font. Now, serif fonts, though they work good as titles, they work well in print, they work well whenever your text is nice and big. When the text is small like it is here, because of the little serifs, because of the little curly bits, it's difficult to read. So what I would say, if you are going to use this style of font, then stick to using it in titles. And if you are going to have body text or text that appears small, use a more modern looking font that doesn't have the little curls. They're called sans serif fonts. So if you're using Typekit or Google Fonts or the fonts that have come in WordPress, just select the sans serif fonts and use those for your body text. There was one more thing I wanted to mention about this website. If we scroll back up to the top, I was pleased to see there's a blog, and I think about 65–70% of you have a blog, which is fantastic. So I wanted to check it out. I was curious, and it said coming soon. I couldn't read it. So if you are going to have a blog, which I think you should, have a blog. If it's in the works and it's coming in 4 weeks, just hide the page. And this applies to any page where the content isn't quite ready. Just hide it until it is, because that just frustrated me more than anything. Okay, we're going to go on to our next website here, which was submitted by Bonnie Walker from OnStar. Again, there's a lot of really good things I could say about this website, and I will right now. Right at the top here, book an appointment. This is fantastic. Not many accountants are doing this yet, but it's a feature that I absolutely love. Patrick from Banbury also does this, and I'm going to highlight that later on. Clients or prospects can physically book either a phone call, a virtual meeting, or a face-to-face meeting from the website. And they can do that here. Say I want to select the phone call. I can select 3 different times for this appointment. It's a really, really smart and slick way of managing appointments. And if there are apps out there like Calendly, where it can pull from your Google Calendar, from your Outlook calendar, from basically any calendar you're using, and put it into one system. So it's a really, really cool thing to have. I'm just going to click back for now. I just wanted to mention that. What I wanted to really highlight on this website is the animation. I'm sure you can see there in the header. It says, welcome to Bonstar Accounting, and then it changes to bookkeeping, and then it changes to payroll. That is a really slick animation. And here we hover over learn more. Again, the button changes. When you use subtly, animation like this is fantastic. It gives the website life. It makes it way more interactive, but it's got to be done right. And I think there's an example where it's not been quite done as well as it could have. And that's, let's scroll down here under their services. Here, particularly when you're hovering over 2 at the same time, and one panel will kind of flip left and one panel will flip right. I kind of turned this into a game at one point. I was trying to flip over as many as I could in one scroll. I think I got 4. I don't think this works particularly well. I think if you are going to use hover animations, or you're going to use this kind of flipping animations, less is more. If we scroll back up to the top, how subtle and clean this animation is at the top here in the header, and again on the button, I think that works far better than something like this. So again, animations are good if they're used sparingly and if they're subtle as well. There was one more thing I wanted to mention about this website. I scroll down here, is the testimonials. As Mark mentioned on his website last week, testimonials are a fantastic tool to add to the website. But I think there's a slight problem here. Some of these testimonials are very, very, this is one example. People aren't really going to read that amount of text. It's quite difficult to read because it's so long. And every testimonial is a different size, and so design-wise, aesthetically-wise, it doesn't look as good as it could do. There's a client, I'm not sure if she's here today. I'm going to show you her website now, who I think does this really well. Melanie, it's a young lady called Melanie Curtis. Let me find her testimonial section. Here we go. So what she's done, she's got a very small excerpt of that testimonial and did it nice and bold. Like the key text here, professional, approachable, and incredibly helpful. And then she's got the full testimonial, which is only 2 or 3 sentences long, just below it. I think something like this works far, far better than the example here on Bonnie's website. Like I said, people aren't going to read that amount of text. And even if they were, it's not laid out in a way which is easy to read. So if you are going to use testimonials, again, have them just a couple of sentences long. And if you can highlight the important key punchy text somehow, like Melanie did, I would try and do that. Okay, I think that was everything on this website. Let's move on to, this was submitted by Taylor from Smith's Accountants. The first thing I did when I go to a website is I check out their social media. And so I went on Taylor's website, I scrolled down, I saw the links, and I clicked on them. And they don't work. The Facebook, the Twitter, and the LinkedIn icons do not work. So if you are going to have social media links, obviously, make sure you have a social media presence. A lot of template website tools like WordPress, if you have a template, they will come with just social media links as standard, and you actually have to remove them rather than add them. So if you are using some sort of template system, make sure that the basics of the template you've got. And this applies to links in general. These links didn't work, but it's good to systematically check all of your links. Maybe once a week, assign someone in your team just to check the links on your website to make sure everything's working. There's a tool actually that I'm going to show you later on, because broken links can negatively affect your SEO. But there's a tool, it's completely free, that takes 10 minutes to do, that will check every single link on your website to see if it's active. And I will show you that a bit later on. One more thing I wanted to mention about this website is content is duplicated. So we've got a homepage. We scroll down and we've got about, we've got the services page, we've got a bit about QuickBooks, and we've got some text under contact. But if we go to the about page specifically, we can see that the exact same content that was on the home page appears on the about page. And if we go to services, we've got the identical content from the home page on the services page. Now people might think, well, that's no big deal, but it is a big deal in terms of SEO. So when Google looks at your website, or when search engines crawl your website, they are looking for duplicate content. And if they see identical content on one page and on another page, it recognizes it as 2 separate websites, and so it will downgrade your ranking because of that. And if you're struggling for content, there's nothing wrong with just having a one-page website. There'd be nothing wrong having just the homepage. And if you want to have these lines up here for about, services, QuickBooks, contact, just have these so they go down here. It's not necessary to have these extra pages if you've not got the content to fill them. It's far better just to have a single page website than it is to duplicate content, just because of how negatively that can affect your SEO ranking. One more thing I just wanted to briefly mention, Mark talked about this a lot on his webinar, which is about stock photography. And this applies to probably 75% of websites in the world, let alone accountants' websites. Stock photography is way overused, and this is a good example. It's really worth the investment, even if you're just on your own, you're a one-man band, just to have a friend with a good camera, take some professional looking pictures of you at a desk with a laptop, just so people, when they land on your website, they feel like they're dealing with a human and they're not dealing with a calculator or three guys that stood next to a pen. Right, I think that was everything I wanted to mention on that website. The next one was a guy called Neil from ND Consultancy. And this had a very unique issue that wasn't applicable to any other website. I'm guessing this website was made several years ago, because when I first landed on this site, my browser was probably more like this size. So if I shrink my browser down like that, you can see that I'm missing content. The contact button on the nav bar disappears. The whole left side of the logo disappears. And content is being missed out on the edge. And it's particularly apparent if I go up here to products and scroll down. If someone has a smaller screen and they go on this website, they are losing half of the content because the website isn't responsive. Most websites, 95% of website builder tools these days, will create a responsive website as standard. So that's why I'm guessing this was made several years ago now. I did check the website on my phone just to check, and he actually has a separate mobile site. So he has one website that appears if someone looks at it on a browser, on a laptop, and one website if someone views it on a mobile phone. And there's several issues with that. If you want to update the content, you've got to do that twice, so it's twice the work. For SEO purposes, it's very bad, because if someone goes on your mobile website but doesn't go on your main website, you're kind of splitting your view count between two sites, and so that's going to negatively affect your ranking. So when you are building a website, make sure you're building one website that's responsive, that will work on all browsers, because you don't want to double your work if nothing else. One point for you, Neil, that I did mention, when I viewed your website, I don't know if you're on the call today, I hope you are. When I viewed your website on my mobile phone, I clicked on the product button on your homepage, and it took me to the services page. So again, it's really important for everyone to check all of the links on your website. Not only does it not look great, but if someone's genuinely trying to find out more information, they can't, it's going to frustrate them, and you could potentially lose them as a client. One more thing, having a background image. I'm not crazy about this. This looks like something I did when I was 12 in ICT class. So if you are going to have images on your website, please have them, but I would recommend you don't have them as a kind of watermark, faded image behind the text. It just makes the text difficult to read, and I don't think it adds anything to the design. Right, let me just make my browser window a little bigger again. And we shall move on to Lynn James from DataLink. Again, I wanted to talk about images one last time, just because it's so important. I was on this page on Lynn's website, and it is just text. It's text, and it's more text. It's more text. It's more text. And we can go on to any page on your website, Lynn, We can go onto our services. And again, you're there, and I think it's a great picture of you. You're smiling nicely. Love that. But with the exception of that image, there's no other images anywhere on the website. Not only do images break up the text, which is important for readability, but people respond far more to images than to text. A picture speaks 1,000 words, and that it really is so true on websites as well. There was one, actually, tell I, there was one image that I did find, and it's on this page. And it was of some word art jigsaw puzzles. So again, it's really worth the investment, even if you're just going to get a friend with a good camera, although I think it is better if you do know a professional photographer, come into your office, take pictures of your team, take pictures of you in your office, at your desk, just to show your personality. And it makes you unique. There could be 10,000 websites that have this particular jigsaw clip art image on, but pictures of you and your team, no one's going to have those images. So that's that makes it very unique to you.
Stephen, can I ask a question at this stage?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think it's because I've done a bit of photography is one of my hobbies, but looking at the picture of Lynn here, it feels wrong to me. And the reason for that is I always feel you should be looking into the page, and therefore do you agree that it would look more balanced and better if it's on the left-hand side because she's looking away from the page, if that makes sense?
Absolutely, yeah. That's
so what I've done when I get professional photos done, I always make sure I get a range of photos looking left and right, and then when people want me to be a guest speaker on a webinar, in my speaker pack, I give them a range of photos and I tell them there's instructions. If you want to use a photo, make sure it's facing the right way.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, and something to bear in mind when you are having photographs taken out your office, to get them shot both ways. Thanks for that, Mark. Someone that does this really well, I'm not sure if he's here today, but I'm going to show his website anyway, is a guy called Reza. I know he does do mentoring programs. I'm sure some of you may know him. He's got dozens of photographs on his websites of him and his team. There's not a page on his website where there isn't either a picture of him or of his team. So on every page you're on, and again, video, really, really cool. On every page that you're on, you're seeing him, you're seeing his office, you're seeing his team. You're making that personal connection. That's so important. So if you do want to know any more about getting a photographer in, you can ask me, ask Mark, or reach out to Reza if you know him. I'm sure he'd be happy to help. Okay, one website that is it's a great website. It's a huge website, but I've only got one piece of feedback for this, is here in the nav bar. So again, like I said, when I go onto a website, the first thing I want to do is I want to check out their social media. And so I clicked on his Facebook icon, and there, when I did this a few days ago, I think I had 3 notifications, I had 2 Facebook messages, and I clicked on the Facebook message to read, and I read that, and then that reminded me that I had to message someone else, and then that reminded me that I had to message someone else, and about 20 minutes later, I'd completely forgotten that I was on Sobo Rose's website in the first place. So if you are going to have social media links on your site, or any link that takes people away from your website, have them open up in a brand new tab. Otherwise, you'll lose them to Twitter, you'll lose them to Facebook. But if you open it in a brand new tab, it will keep your website open and then just open up an auxiliary link that they can click on if they want. That was the only point I wanted to make from this website, but this is a great example of quite a good website. So if you are looking to look at inspiration for your site, Sobo Roses is a great example. Okay, we're here. This was Patrick. I mentioned Patrick's website earlier, actually, because he again has this book an appointment, and this is really slick. I'm going to click on this now, and he uses, like I mentioned, Calendly, and he's got all these different meetings that people can book onto: a face-to-face one, a virtual meeting, different times. So if you are using or if you are wanting to use some sort of appointment booking system, Calendly is fantastic. And this is a great example, I think, of how it should be done. What I would do, Patrick, is have more detail. Here you've got the title, and you've got space to have what's included in that meeting. You've done that on a couple of examples. You've got here on the 60-minute training session, and up here on the initial online meeting with prospective clients, but the rest of them are blank. So if you were wanting to kind of give people more information so they're going to book straight away, because this could be a prospect that wants to book straight away, and without knowing exactly what's included, they might not trust you yet. So just give them more information, and that would work even better. But again, I think it's a fantastic thing that you've got there. Let me come off of that and go back to your website. So when I went on this website, I knew you had a blog, because I've read some of your blog posts on your Facebook page, I think it was. So when I went on your website, I was surprised that I couldn't see a blog tab, but then I found it hidden under this services section. I think that's unnecessary. I would have it as its own standalone tab. I wouldn't try and hide your blog somewhere deep in your website. So I would probably move that if you can. Again, this was an issue with a couple of sites, these pop-ups. Again, whenever you go onto a new page, this pop-up will appear, and I find that quite frustrating. So if any of you are using pop-ups on your website, double check that the settings are set so if someone clicks off of it, it doesn't instantly appear when they go back to the home page or onto a brand new page like it does here. Anyway, I was on your blog, and the first thing I wanted to mention is studies have shown that when images are used on blogs, one, people are far more likely to click on them to read them, and they're far more likely to continue reading if there's images used. You've not used any images on your blog or in the blog posts themselves, so that's something if you can fix, I would recommend doing, just because if you're tracking how many people are reading your posts, I would put money on it. As soon as you start adding header images and images on the blog posts themselves, your click rate and the time people spend reading is going to increase, no doubt. Anyway, that's just one point I wanted to make. I clicked on just a random post. I think it was this one, top 7 productivity tools, and then I clicked on it again to read it, and the page didn't work. You're linking to an external website, and I'm sure at the time that was a live link, but it's not anymore. So I clicked back. Patrick, this pop-up is frustrating. I clicked back, and I thought I'd click on the next one down. Sorry about this pop-up. And again, this link didn't work. And I did this to 3 or 4 consecutive links on your website, and they all are linked to external sources, and all the links are broke. Not only does that not look particularly good, but that does have a negative impact on your SEO ranking. Again, there's a tool I will show you later on that will automatically check all the links on your site. But for blog posts, it's always a good idea not to link to external content unless you absolutely have to, just because if the link breaks, you've got no way of knowing, and something like this could happen. And like I said, I think it was on 3 or 4 different posts that I just randomly clicked on. But well done for having a blog. It is a really, really good thing to have. So if you've not got one, that's something that I would recommend looking into immediately. Talking of pop-ups, actually, do you see this pop-up, this cookies pop-up? I couldn't actually get rid of this. This doesn't disappear. And it's not so much of an issue on the desktop, but I looked at your site on a mobile phone, and that takes up quite a large chunk of the screen. And so that was quite frustrating. So if you do have a pop-up, like a cookies pop-up, make sure that's working correctly. Okay, moving on to our penultimate website. This is Patricia. Patricia, if you're on the call, I'm sorry, but this was probably the worst website of the lot that I looked at for a few reasons. There's no brand, there's no logo, there's no feeling of uniqueness with the site. There's no identity. It just looks like a generic cookie cutter template website. So I would, if you can, invest in maybe someone to work on some branding for you, a logo, maybe get a strong color palette, just so the website has a bit more personality. Next, so I was on your website, and then I clicked onto your services page, and look up here onto the URL toolbar. We've got your website address /services.html. I removed the .html suffix, and it broke the website. And this is the same for all your pages. So not only do I think it doesn't look particularly good having the services.html, but if someone, if that is removed, it breaks the website completely. So the change you want to make is in your HT access file. I'm sure you don't know how to do this, but whoever designs your site will have access to that file. So ask your web designer to edit your HT access file. And anyone else that's got a website that has that and they think, oh, that's peculiar, I want to get rid of that, ask whoever designed your site, edit that HT access file, and they can remove that with just a few lines of code. One more thing, actually there's two more things. If I scroll down to the bottom, the date here, if you are going to have a date on your website, just make sure that it's up to date. We're in April right now, and so it doesn't look particularly professional by having an old date. All the other websites that I checked, all other 9 websites all had 2020, which was fantastic. This can be automated. You can code into your website. Your designer can code into your website that changes automatically every year, so you never have to worry about it ever again. Just do that once, and that will just change. And in 2021, it will change without you even having to do anything. One more thing I wanted to mention was up here in the toolbar again. There's no SSL certificate. Now, an SSL, you'll see it's like a green padlock that you see on most websites these days. It encrypts data. So if someone completes a contact form, when that information is sent to you, it encrypts it so people can't hack in and steal the information. Now, your website doesn't have a contact form, so you might say it's not absolutely necessary to have one, but the client-account relationship is based on trust. And so if they don't perceive that you have a trustworthy website, if they can't have confidence that your website is secure, then I'm sure they're less likely going to like they can trust you or have confidence in you. They're probably about $60 to $120 a year, depending on who you're hosting with. So it's a small investment, but it's something that you should definitely do, even if you've not got a contact form where you're trying to encrypt data. It's still something that you should definitely do. Okay, finally, Prospero. Now, there's a lot of really good things I could say about this website, but something that I noticed straight away is this. If I scroll down, we see he's got his ebook above the fold. So far, he's doing everything right. I scroll down and you see the text. It goes over the image and it becomes unreadable. Now, I checked it in, I'm using Google Chrome. I checked it in Firefox and this wasn't an issue. So as well as checking your links on your website, make sure you're checking all the pages on your website in different browsers, at least in Chrome, in Firefox, or Safari, since they do react differently to different websites. So you may check your website on Firefox and think everything's perfect, but if someone's using Chrome and they're seeing little issues like this, it just doesn't look particularly good. So check your website, Google Chrome, Firefox, and on Safari. I think that was one of the only things I wanted to mention on that website. But this is, Brenny, this is a really great website. I don't know if you watched Mark's webinar where he talked about having a lead capture system, using video, having great content. working on your layout and your navigation, you're ticking all the boxes. So this really is a great website. One more point though that I did mention. We look here in the header. You're using white text on images, and this one, the second image, it kind of cuts off advisors. It kind of cuts off the first part of chartered. So if you are using text on images, just make sure that it's completely readable. And this will change depending on the size of the browser. So if I made the browser smaller or larger, it would change the dimensions. And so maybe on a small screen, that image works, but on a larger screen, it doesn't. So as well as checking it on different browsers, check it on different sizes. Have someone physically move your browser bigger and smaller. So you're making sure that the images that you're using work not only on a big screen, but on a tablet, on a phone, or on any device. Right, I think that was everything I wanted to mention on the website critiques. The website critiques that Mark did on his video, I think about 6 weeks ago now, were a lot more in depth, and they talked about specific things like photography, like content, getting the right copy. So if you've not watched that video, contact Sarah, Mark, Emily, and I would seriously recommend watching that, since there's a lot of really good information there. But for now, I'm going to switch back to my slides. If you bear with me for 1 second. There was a question that someone submitted during Mark's webinar last time that was about SEO, and Mark ran out of time because SEO is such a big topic. He didn't get time to cover it. So there's a few thoughts that I just wanted to add now regarding SEO, since it's always a question that I get asked, like, how do I improve my SEO? How do I get my website to rank higher in Google? And there's so many answers to that question. There's dozens and dozens of factors that go into how Google will rank your website. And it can take time. It can take literally weeks and months to improve your SEO. But there's a few things that you can do today. Right now, it would take an hour to instantly improve your SEO. And so I'm just going to go over them briefly now. The first thing you can do is to improve your site loading time. Not only does Google rank websites that have a quicker loading time, but if your website's slow, if someone goes to your site and it's taken 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds to load a page, they're going to get frustrated, they're going to leave. They're just going to leave the site. People are really impatient these days. So you want to make sure your website loads as quickly as possible. So how do you test that? Well, there's all kinds of tools out there. This is just one, gtmetrics.com. I use Rennie's website as an example, the last one we looked at. He has a great website, but when you run it through a speed test, a performance checker, it doesn't score particularly well. And there's so many tools out there that do the same thing, but I'm just going to show you this as an example. They tell you exactly what's wrong with it. And 9 times out of 10, and I checked a few websites, it's the images that are slowing down the site. So this is true in Rennie's case. So I've clicked on Optimize Images, and it tells me all the images that are too big. They can be smaller without losing quality, and it will just load the page a lot quicker. So definitely, if you feel like you've got a slow site, or even if you haven't, run your website through one of these speed checkers. And there's loads out there. I did it on this GT Metrics, but there's one called .com-tools that I ran Rennie's website through. And again, the number one thing was optimize the images. And 9 times out of 10, that will be the issue. If you're building your website yourself on, say, WordPress, and you want to upload images of your team or of your office, make sure that the size of the image that you're uploading is exactly the size that you need, and it's no bigger than it has to be. The standard quality that an image should be online is 72 pixels per inch. So if you see the properties on your images, if it's 72, you know that's perfect for the web. Make sure the size is just right, no bigger, no smaller, and that is the single biggest thing you can do to speed up the speed of your website. But there's also other things that these website speed tests will pick up. So it's definitely something that you should do. Most of them are free, and they take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to do. The next thing that Google loves is content. Content is so important. If you watched Mark's webinar last week or 2-3 weeks ago, you'll know how important having good quality content is. And one of the best ways you can do this is to create a business blog, where you can regularly post articles that are relevant to your clients. And there's 3 things that you want to remember when you're creating your blog, along with the things we mentioned earlier about images. And I told you we were going to come back to SDA's website later on, and we're going to do that in a second, because he's got something on his blog that's really cool and not something that I've seen all that often. But before we do that, when you're creating your blog posts, there's 3 things you want to keep in mind. You want to add value. You want to be regular. So you see a lot of websites that will post 3 things in March, like 1 every day, and then it's not until December of the following year that they post again. That doesn't look good. So if you are going to commit to doing a blog, don't feel like you need to post every day. If you've only got enough time to post 25 times a year, do it once every 2 weeks. That's completely fine. Just make sure it is regular. And finally, make sure you're solving a problem. People aren't going to keep reading your blogs if they're not getting value from it, if you're not answering their questions, if you're not solving their challenges and problems. So make sure there's a real focus on each post to solve a particular problem that your client has. Now, I said I was going to show you SDA's website again, and I will, because this is really cool. I was really impressed by this, actually. Let me just go back to my browser for 1 sec. Back here. So we go to their blog. When it loads. And so they've got their blogs, as you saw, but also, if we scroll down to the bottom, it's got video blogs. It's got video business tips, where people are seeing Stanley answering these questions, and it's him doing it to the camera. It's a really, really cool thing to do. People are going to connect with Stanley far better over a video than they are with words. It is quite a big commitment to do something like this. So don't feel like just because you can't do this, you shouldn't do a normal text blog, because that is super valuable. But if you can do this, if you're happy, if you're comfortable in front of a camera, and you've got time, you can commit a bit of time to doing these video blogs. It's a really, really slick thing to do. Let me switch back now. I just wanted to show you that. I think I've seen that once before, but I don't see that all that often. So nice one, Stanley. Very impressed. Okay, the next thing that you can do for SEO is improving your metadata. You may have heard the phrase metadata before. Basically, it's information that's usually in the back end of your website that tells Google what's on each page. And there's 3 main areas of metadata that are mentioned here: page titles, page descriptions, and image and video tags. Now, Google likes to know exactly what's on your page, so it knows if it's a good website or not. And if you've got text or images on a page that don't have descriptions or titles or alt tags, Google can't read it. Google can't read an image. So you need to make sure, whether you're using WordPress or Squarespace or whatever you're using, make sure your every title, every page has a title, every page has a description. You're not cramming your website with keywords. There was a movement about 10 years ago where people would stuff keywords into a website because they thought that helped their ranking. And for a time it did. But Google 5-6 years ago changed that, and it actually has a negative impact now. So don't stuff your website with keywords. Make sure each page title, each description is unique. And make sure that if you are using images and videos on your website, that each one has a description. This is read by screen readers for people that are blind, but it's also read by Google, and they want to know exactly what the image is before they send someone there. So it doesn't take too long, and it's a really useful thing to do. I checked the metadata on SDA's website. You can see it here, and everything was perfect. Every single page, every single image had a description. So again, I was really impressed with your website, Stanley. Now, I mentioned earlier about dead links. Again, not only does it not look particularly good if someone's going to the website, they're wanting to click on a link onto a blog post and they get a 404 error, but Google will rank you lower if you do have dead links on your site. There's this tool, deadlinkchecker.com. It's free to use. It will probably take about 10 to 20 minutes to run your site, depending on how large the site is. I started to run Stanley's, and there were a few links that were broken. So check your website using this tool. It's free, it doesn't take long, and it might alert you to any blog posts or any links that are on your site that are no longer working. You can, I believe there's a paid for version where this site will automatically check your website. But that's not absolutely necessary. You can just do this. If you do it once, or if you create a system where you're doing it once every 3 months, that should be more than sufficient. Finally, I'm not sure how many of you use Google Analytics. It's a really, really useful tool, but there's a lot to it. And there's so many stats that you can get from Google Analytics that it can feel a bit overwhelming at times. But there's one stat in particular that if you were to pay more attention to than the others, I would, which is your bounce rate, which is effectively the number of users that go to your website and then leave after viewing just one single page. That's called a bounce. There could be a whole number of reasons why people are leaving your website. Maybe they're not finding contact details on your homepage quick enough. Maybe the site is taking too long to load. Maybe the design isn't appealing to them, and so they're just thinking, this isn't the right company for me. If you notice that your homepage has a high bounce rate, Google Analytics will tell you that. And then you can start to make changes to your website to try and bring that number down. And you can make a number of changes and then test it. Wait a month and see if your bounce rate goes up or down. So that is a really, really useful thing you can do. And if your website has a high bounce rate, Google knows that. And so it will rank sites lower if they do have a poorer bounce rate. So those are 4 things that you can do relatively quickly to improve your SEO. That's been about 50 minutes now, Mark. So if you wanted to jump back in, if there's any questions, we can answer them now.
Okay, Stephen. Yeah, there are some questions that come in. There's also a couple of people who said they submitted their sites, but they didn't make it to you, and they asked whether you could look or not. I don't know how we'll deal with that. It's just I know Nadeem Raju actually said in the very first webinar that I did, he said, "Could somebody look at my site?" And for whatever reason, we didn't get that, Nadeem. So not sure if there's somewhere we can do that, Steve. Somehow we can do that at some point. But anyway, the questions I have got are some of them are comments. Neil Criddle said, "Thanks for the critique, very helpful." So I can mark that off. And Nicola Deverson said, "How do you open the social media in a new tab?"
It will vary slightly depending on what platform you're using, but there'll be a setting, it will either be a checkbox that will say, it will literally say open in new tab or open in new window. So make sure that is checked.
Yeah, I think most tools have that. We use Kajabi for our website, and we can put links in wherever we want. And you always have to make sure you check that, because it never defaults to that. And you have to make sure that you've checked it.
Yeah. Any links that go internally, any links that stay within the same website, always want to open up in the same tab. It's only links that go to an external page, any links that take you outside of the website.
Yeah. Okay, Letty says, could you talk a bit, I don't know whether you can or not, this might be outside of, I don't know if we can do this or not, but she says, could you talk a bit about the legal aspects of the website, when to disclose the cookies note, for example, or other legal notes that we should pay attention on websites for bookkeepers? You got any thoughts?
The cookies thing, if you're using a platform like WordPress or Squarespace, or if your designer's using something similar, that's automatic. So you don't have to worry about that. If you're using a designer that's using a platform like WordPress, that won't be a problem. That should automatically appear. He'll make sure that that appears. If you're building the website yourself, I'm not sure. I've not come across a tool where that isn't an option. So just make sure that you're using a platform where that does come as standard.
Yeah, there's not a huge amount that springs to mind, Letty, in terms of other legal issues. Obviously, don't pinch people's copyright when you're creating your site. Don't steal other people's content. And also, if you're collecting contact details, just make sure you're aware of the GDPR issues. They're the other things that I can think of.
Stock images, I guess, if you've not licensed them, make sure you purchase stock images.
Absolutely. Yeah, that can be expensive if you get caught out. Another question from Letty then says, is it a good idea to link my website to another website such as an Etsy store, or would that distract my visitor?
I guess if the purpose of the website was to drive people to the Etsy store, then that's a fantastic thing to do. If that's not the purpose of the site, it's just going to distract people, then it just depends why you're wanting to do it.
Okay. Patty's, this might not be a question. Patty says, thanks for your thoughts. She's not a tech girl. She's going to work on bringing the website up to scratch. So, Jodie Roberts' question here, what would the best platform to use for website building, and is there a specific template that you could recommend?
So I don't use, personally, I have in the past tried to use WordPress or use things like Squarespace, but I find them a bit too restrictive. You always have to use a template with something like Squarespace. So you're bound to certain design parameters. And so I've always come across issues where I want to do something, but I can't. And so I actually build my websites from scratch, and they're coded from scratch. And so there's no design limitations that way. If you do want to do it yourself, using Squarespace is probably your best bet. WordPress can get a little more technical because there's a lot of plugins with WordPress that you don't have with Squarespace. But if you've got the budget to allow to get a designer to do it that doesn't have to use a template, so you're not bound by certain parameters, that's probably what I would do.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Lynn James just thanks you for the critique as well. Mark Stewart says, did you say that you designed Reza and Mel Curtis's website?
I didn't do Mel's, no. Reza's I did do. Reza uses a platform called Rocket Spark. So you are bound with Rocket Spark. That again is like a Squarespace WordPress type platform. That's not the best personally. I know Reza likes it. I don't particularly like working with it. But Mel's was done by a different company.
Okay, Neil Criddle says, hi Stephen, what would you consider a decent bounce rate for a website? Is it dependent on certain factors, industries, etc.?
It does depend. What I would do is, if you've got Google Analytics installed on your website now, I would check if you're getting people, if you're getting more than, I know I'm almost pulling a number out, I don't want to just pull a number out of the air. If you're getting more than half of the people that are landing on your website and then immediately leaving, there's obviously a problem. So I would ask your friends, ask your family to go to your website and give you their honest opinion and say, if you were looking for an accountant, would you want to use me? And they might say the reasons why they would or why they wouldn't. and then make changes, and then you can actually track in Google Analytics the effect that's had. So I would start by checking your bounce rate now, asking for honest opinions from friends, and then making changes and then tracking as you go along.
Thank you. Brian says, this is to do with metadata, are page titles and descriptions hidden in the website?
Yes, they are. Where they do appear, on the website browser, when you go to a new page, you see the title in a little tab. You also see it, if you Google your business, you'll see the information that's listed on Google is the metadata, so it appears there. If someone hovers over an image and they have alt text switched on, that text will just appear as like a pop-out. But in general, it is hidden on the website itself, yes.
Okay, this next one's an interesting one that I think you'll love. Patricia says, as a bookkeeper who hires a web designer, I expect them to be the expert. Is it not their responsibility to be checking all the links, bounce rates, etc.?
Yeah, they can do. Whether they want to do it for free is a different story. But if you've hired a designer that's happy to manage the entire process, then that's fantastic. If you do want to save a bit of money and check that yourself, then that's up to you. Some firms want to be in complete control. Some people want to be able to edit their own content and add new pages. Other accountants might be happy just to let someone just manage the entire process themselves. One's obviously going to cost a little bit more. So I guess it really depends on you, how comfortable you are using the technology and what your budget is.
Yeah, also, and this is just my own personal experience before I used you, Stephen, but I kind of, and I don't know what your thoughts on this, but I kind of get the sense that there are some people out there who claim to be web designers who might be great designers, but don't necessarily understand all the technical stuff behind it. And also there are people that call themselves web designers who understand all the tech stuff, they're techies, but their design's awful.
Yes, yeah. That last one happens more often than I care to mention, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's about finding someone who can do both sides of it, both great design and understand some of the technical stuff behind websites.
The tools you use now, like Google Analytics, they're so, if you can get your head around the amount of information that it gives you, once you know what you're looking for, it's not particularly difficult. So what you could do, you could ask your web designer to explain the key numbers they want to be tracking, and then you can do it. So just with a bit of training, I'm sure most people could get their head around the basics.
Yeah. Okay, Jeff from the US says, Stephen, can you please evaluate the use of website creating sites such as Wix, Squarespace, and Weebly? Are they worthy of using, in your opinion?
Some are better than others. Wix, I've never seen a Wix website that looks good. I've seen loads of Squarespace websites that are beautifully designed. But again, if you're wanting to use something like that, check the templates first. So go to those websites and check through and see if there's a template that you like the look of. Because once you settle on a template, there's not an awful lot of wiggle room as to what you can do with it. You can change the colors, you can change the images, but the general layout is essentially set. So that's why I prefer to code them from scratch, just because there's no limitations then. But out of all the platforms I've used, Squarespace is by far the best.
Okay. Gordon De Silva says, would landing pages have a high bounce rate?
It depends how good a landing page is, I guess. If people, I presume we're talking about some sort of golden carrot, like a lead generation ebook, perhaps.
That's what I was thinking. I guess it depends on what's the purpose of the landing page. Is it a lead page to collect contact details?
I mean, if people are submitting contact details, then no, it would have a very low bounce rate. I can't imagine I can't envision a page that people would just go to without doing something on the page itself.
Okay. Kay Westmoreland says, when sharing testimonials, could you connect to client websites as a way of promoting them too?
I mean, you could do. I'm not sure why you'd want to, though. Anytime you're taking your users away from your site onto other websites, you're asking them to be distracted by something. So I wouldn't recommend doing that personally, unless you've got some sort of quid pro quo with that client agreed in advance.
Yeah, that's my feeling. Nadeem says, can our website link to our other brands, like personal brand or separate Facebook group?
I don't see why not. Again, if the purpose of your website is to drive people to join your Facebook group, or one of the purposes of a page on your website, say, is to drive people to join your Facebook group, then that's a great thing to do. When you're creating a website or you're creating a page, you want to think, what am I trying to get people to do? And if your purpose isn't primarily to take people to Facebook, then maybe don't. But if it is, then yeah, it's a great thing to do.
Stephen, we've got more questions, but I'm kind of, Carol in the chat box said, Stephen, is there an offer to help on an existing website to make it better? So before I do the next question, the Q&A box, you might want to just mention it.
Yeah, me and Mark have agreed that any members of the Value Pricing Academy for the rest of April, so what's that, or just over 3 weeks, if you do want help with a website, the design, the build, I am giving Value Pricing members 25% off for all of April. That is my email address. If you were interested in just getting in touch, stephen@noir-designs.co.uk. I'm happy to hear from any of you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Where are we? So a couple of people just saying thank you again for the critique. Rennie with his site and Bonnie with her site. Rennie then says, is the SSL secure just the padlock in the browser? Ours shows as grey and not green in Google Chrome.
No, it's just the padlock. Different browsers will display it slightly differently. If the padlock is locked, that means the SSL is on. Okay,
Andrew Rose says, thanks for the critique of their website. We'd very much like to discuss you redoing theirs. So, Andrew, you've got Stephen's email address. Gordon says, if I'm posting video blogs, is it important to add text too?
No, I don't think so. I think the text, the person doing the speaking is in place of the text. Some people prefer to watch videos. Personally, I prefer to watch the video rather than reading an article. So if I were to watch a video, I wouldn't want to do any auxiliary reading after that. So I'd be happy with just a video.
Yeah, but I also think that, and was it Stan? I think it was Stanley's website. I think having a mix of both written blogs and video blogs, because as you said, Stephen, different people prefer different things. So having a mix of both just helps you capture a wider audience.
Stanley's blog is the best blog I've seen in a long time, so I was really impressed by that.
Yep, well done, Stanley. Gordon also says, thoughts on a sidebar?
Most people are used to, I presume he means having the navigation bar on the side rather than the top.
I presume so.
Most people are used to navigation bars that are at the top. I've seen some that work on the side. Personally, I prefer them at the top just because I think people are used to that. And if you're asking someone to spend an extra few seconds trying to find your menu bar just because it kind of looks a bit better, I don't think that's worth it really. I like websites that are just easy to use. As soon as someone lands on it, they know exactly what to do. So if it's slightly more complicated because of a sidebar, you've got to think, is that worth it or not?
Yep, agreed. And then this might be the last question for the moment. Again, Gordon says, when you do a search for some sites, how do they get a few listings of key pages like some have on the search results? I'm not sure I understand that. You might. I don't know.
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, when you do a search for some sites, how do they get a few listings of key pages like some have?
I presume he means if you Google something.
I think it's Google, yes.
Yeah, more than one search result is for the same website.
Yeah.
And if that website is, if you Googled accountants in and you picked a really small town that had 3 accountants in, and your website's set up fantastically, and all your page titles are great. The SEO is really good. Google's is gonna give the user multiple options, and that could include several pages from your website. If the better your website's set up, and the kind of narrower the search people are doing on Google, the more likely you're going to have multiple pages on your website listed. But normally it will just be their homepage.
Yeah. Okay. I think that might be it in terms of questions. I'm kind of pausing in case any more come. Oh, hang on. No, might be one more from Rajiv. Rajiv says, how can you Rajiv is now talking about the VPA portal. How can I download the video? You can't. You can only download the audio from the VPA site. But it's going to be up there for a while, Rajiv. So you have a chance to just watch it a few times and make plenty of notes. There's also, for those of you in the Value Pricing Academy, because I know some are from the Bookkeepers Pricing Academy, there is a workbook coming out fairly soon as well, which will contain pretty much everything that we've covered in this webinar and the one I did previous to that. So the workbook will be with you very soon. Okay, we've got, I think we've got more questions coming in now. Sorry. Let's see. We have, this is always the way. When I say last question, then a whole load more come in. Jeff says, thank you for the very
cloudy today, Mark, so I don't mind not going to the beach today.
You don't want to go to the beach? No, you're bored of the beach now. When designing a website, what are the platforms that you use that allow owners to update content themselves?
Most of the platforms we've mentioned, WordPress, Squarespace, Wix, will allow the owner to do it themselves. If you do get a designer to code it from scratch, you can ask them if they can give you access. Most of the time, if they're building it on something that has a content management system, CMS, you'll be able to do that. So the websites that I create, you can update all the content yourself. It can be built, it can be designed, it can be handed over to you, and then you've got access to edit any of the pages, to edit any of the images, or any of the text yourself. So just make sure that if you're using a designer, you're getting a content management system as well.
Okay, thank you. We might have one more question, then you can go to the beach. So David Bankovic says, do you feel that no stock images should be included on the website?
No, I think a good stock image is better than no image at all. There are some images that look more stocky than others. The free ones you can get are obviously not very good, but if you go to something like Shutterstock and you're paying for images, you can get some images that don't look overly stocky. So yeah, buying a stock image is better than no image whatsoever.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't know. You look reticent.
No, I agree. I think that you want to have some images on your site. I would still always try and personalize them, but some good quality stock images are important. The ones that I really hate is when people use things that look like clip art, which used to be many years ago, but now they stand out, those sorts of images.
They were bad in the 90s, so.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it, Stephen. That was absolutely awesome. I can see in the chat box there have been lots of great comments from people.
Good.
Really useful. I mean, I was fascinated just listening. I'm not used to listening. I usually doing the presenting, but I got loads of notes and stuff I've learned as well, particularly the SEO stuff and some of the tools you mentioned. So
fantastic. Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. So thanks so much for that. I'm sure some people will be contacting you at some point, and obviously we'll speak soon because we've got loads of projects on right now. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for attending. Thank you for asking great questions. And we will be back in 2 weeks' time for the usual mentoring week. So 2 weeks today is the next Marketing Monday, where we'll be looking at how do you write great copy? What are the words that you should be using to get results? That's 2 weeks today. And then, of course, we've got Advanced Tuesday, Foundation Wednesday, and How To Thursday. So I'll see you all in 2 weeks' time.